He was not what you expected. No dark alley warnings, no wild eyes, no visible signs of madness. He wore clean clothes, spoke gently, and smiled the kind of smile that made people feel safe. He helped strangers carry books across college campuses. He volunteered on political campaigns. He studied law. He had a girlfriend who loved him deeply. And while everyone around him saw an intelligent, charming young man building an ordinary future, he was murdering women across an entire nation. This is the story of Ted Bundy. A man so skilled at appearing normal that dozens of women died before America understood what he truly was. A man so dangerous that his name permanently changed how this country thinks about evil. A man whose smile was not a sign of innocence. It was his deadliest weapon. What you are about to hear will disturb you, not because Ted Bundy looked like a monster, but because he did not. Ted Bundy was born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. From the very beginning, his life was built on secrets and lies. For years, Bundy believed his grandparents were his parents. His own mother was introduced to him as his older sister. The truth about his biological father was never fully confirmed. Psychologists later pointed to this fractured identity as one of the earliest cracks in his foundation. His grandfather was reportedly violent and unpredictable. The household was filled with tension, secrecy, and emotional instability. Neighbors remembered a quiet boy who seemed emotionally distant, never fully connected to the world around him. As a teenager, Bundy moved to Washington State and desperately tried to build the image of a normal American young man. He was intelligent. He was ambitious. He studied hard, joined political circles, and carefully learned how to imitate confidence even when he felt deeply insecure inside. But beneath that performance, something dark was already growing. By the early 1970s, young women across the Pacific Northwest began disappearing. College students vanished from campuses, parking lots, and public parks. Families filed missing person reports. Police departments in different states struggled to connect the cases. Each disappearance seemed isolated until a pattern slowly emerged. Witnesses described the same man repeatedly. Handsome. Well-dressed, sometimes wearing a cast or sling on his arm. Politely asking women for help carrying something to his car. Always calm. Always smiling. That was Ted Bundy. He understood something terrifying about human nature. Most people instinctively trust someone who appears injured and polite. Bundy weaponized that trust with chilling precision. Once a woman was isolated with him, she had no chance of escape. His attacks were sudden and overwhelming. He planned every detail carefully. He selected victims who resembled a specific type. Young, attractive college students with long dark hair. He revisited crime scenes. He moved bodies. In some cases, he returned repeatedly to the remains of his victims. Detectives discovered that Bundy sometimes kept severed heads in his apartment as trophies. The murders were not simply acts of violence, they were rituals of control. In July 1974, 2 women disappeared from Lake Sammamish State Park near Seattle on the same day. Multiple witnesses reported the same man, charming, wearing a sling, introducing himself simply as Ted. For the first time, investigators had both a name and a recognizable pattern. Composite sketches circulated across Washington State. Tips flooded police departments. One name appeared repeatedly in reports submitted by separate witnesses who did not know each other: Ted Bundy. But he looked so ordinary that investigators struggled to take the lead seriously. Bundy continued traveling freely through Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Colorado, leaving a trail of missing women behind him. In January 1975, Bundy made a critical mistake. He approached a young woman named Carol Duranch in a Utah shopping mall, pretending to be a police officer. He told her someone had attempted to break into her car and convinced her to accompany him to verify the report. Once inside his vehicle, Bundy suddenly snapped handcuffs onto her wrist. Carol Duranch fought back with everything she had. She screamed, struggled, and threw herself out of the moving car onto the road. She survived. Her testimony became one of the most important breakthroughs in the entire investigation. In August 1975, police finally pulled Bundy over during a late-night traffic stop in Utah. Inside his vehicle, they found handcuffs, a crowbar, a ski mask, and rope. Even then, Bundy remained calm, speaking to officers with quiet confidence, projecting the image of a misunderstood law student who had nothing to hide. The mask was beginning to crack. Bundy was convicted of kidnapping Carol DeRange and transferred to Colorado to face murder charges. What happened next shocked the entire country. Convinced that his intelligence and charm could defeat the justice system, Bundy chose to represent himself in court. He studied law obsessively. He questioned witnesses personally. He treated the courtroom like a stage, smiling at cameras, adjusting his tie, and performing with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. Then, he escaped. In June 1977, during a courthouse library visit in Aspen, Colorado, Bundy jumped from a second-story window and vanished into the mountains. Search teams captured him days later, exhausted and disoriented. But authorities underestimated him again. Months later, Bundy lost weight deliberately, cutting his food for weeks until he was thin enough to squeeze through a small hole he cut in the ceiling of his jail cell. He crawled through the building, entered his jailer's apartment while the man was away, changed clothes, walked calmly out the front door, and disappeared into the night. It was just before Christmas 1977. Bundy fled to Florida, and everything became far worse. In January 1978, he entered the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University in the early morning hours. Within minutes, he brutally attacked 4 young women, killing 2 of them. The violence was frenzied and reckless, completely unlike his earlier controlled abductions. Shortly afterward, he abducted and murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. The nation was horrified. Bundy was finally arrested again in February 1978 after a patrol officer noticed a stolen vehicle in Pensacola, Florida. This time, the evidence was overwhelming. Bite mark analysis connected him directly to the Chi Omega murders. Surviving witnesses identified him without hesitation. The charismatic predator who had outsmarted police for years was finally out of moves. The trial became one of the first major courtroom spectacles of the television age. Cameras broadcast Bundy's behavior into homes across America. Viewers watched a man accused of unimaginable crimes smile at reporters, flirt with admirers, and cross-examine witnesses with disturbing confidence. In one unforgettable moment, Bundy proposed marriage to a former co-worker while she was on the witness stand. Under Florida law at the time, the declaration counted as a legal marriage. The scene stunned the courtroom and fascinated a watching nation. The jury was not impressed. Bundy was convicted and sentenced to death for the Chi Omega murders and the killing of Kimberly Leach. Judge Edward Coward looked directly at Bundy and delivered words that became famous across America. "You are a bright young man. You would have made a good lawyer. But you went the wrong way. It is an utter tragedy." Then, he sentenced him to die in the electric chair. On death row, Bundy continued granting interviews, sometimes confessing partially, always manipulating conversations, always maintaining psychological distance from the suffering he caused. As his execution approached, confessions came faster. Authorities believe Bundy murdered at least 30 women across 7 states. The true number may never be known. His final confessions revealed details so disturbing that experienced investigators struggled emotionally while listening. In his very last interviews, Bundy attempted to blame violent pornography for his crimes. Psychologists and investigators dismissed the explanation as one final manipulation, a last desperate attempt to shift responsibility away from the only person truly responsible: himself. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. Crowds gathered outside before sunrise. People waved signs and cheered as news crews documented the moment. After years of terror, America wanted this chapter closed. Inside the prison, the current passed through his body at 7:16 in the morning. Ted Bundy was pronounced dead. But the nightmare he left behind never fully ended. Bundy shattered the most dangerous assumption society makes about evil: that monsters look like monsters, that danger feels like danger before it is too late. Ted Bundy was educated. He was charming. He was handsome. He attended classes, maintained relationships, and moved through ordinary communities completely undetected. He was terrifying not because he looked different from everyone else. He was terrifying because he did not. The women he murdered had families, friendships, ambitions, and futures. They were not just victims in a criminal case. They were daughters, sisters, and friends whose lives were stolen by a man skilled at performing humanity while feeling none of it. Their stories deserve to be remembered. The real legacy of Ted Bundy is not a lesson about one man's evil. It is a warning about how easily evil can hide in plain sight, and how much it costs when we refuse to see it until it is already too late.